Remember when cars had actual character? Today we're diving into 15 cars we missed from the 80s in Great Britain. Remember Dad insisting on a Ford Capri while Mum favoured the practical Metro, you begging for anything with a spoiler, but Grandad swearing by his faithful Rover. What made these motors truly special wasn't their cutting-edge technology or reliability. Quite the opposite, actually. The twist is that we love them precisely because they were flawed, temperamental, and uniquely characteristic in ways that modern motors simply can't match. These weren't just cars, they were members of the family, complete with nicknames, quirks, and personalities that created stories we still tell today. If you learned to drive in the 1980s, chances are you either learned in an Escort or it was your first car. The MK3 arrived in 1980 as Ford's new world car, designed to be sold globally with minimal changes. In Britain, it became ubiquitous, consistently ranking as one of the best-selling cars throughout the decade. The Escort came in a bewildering array of versions. From the basic 1.1 popular to the rally-bred RS Turbo, there was an Escort for every budget and taste. The XR3 and later XR3i became the must-have hot hatches, with their distinctive cloverleaf alloy wheels and pepperpot grills. These cars created a whole culture of modifying and customizing that continues today. What made the Escort so popular was its simplicity. They were straightforward to maintain, parts were readily available and cheap, and they were generally reliable if looked after. The driving experience might have been unremarkable in standard form, but that accessibility made them perfect for young drivers taking their first steps into car ownership. The Golf GTI Mark I might have invented the hot hatch, but the Mark II, launched in 1984, perfected it. With its distinctive red stripe grille, wide wheel arches and GTI badging, it became the car every young professional aspired to own. It represented quality, performance, and a certain lifestyle that was very appealing in the aspirational 1980s. What set the Golf GTI apart was its build quality. While British hot hatches often felt like regular cars with bigger engines bolted in, the GTI felt properly engineered. Everything from the supportive sports seats to the golf ball gear knob showed attention to detail. The 8-valve and later 16-valve engines provided strong performance, while the handling was predictable and rewarding. The GTI created its own subculture. Owners formed clubs, magazines dedicated pages to them, and they became the benchmark against which all other hot hatches were measured. The famous GTI television adverts, particularly the one featuring Paula Hamilton, became cultural touchstones of the decade. Launched in October 1980, the Austin Metro was British Leyland's most important new car in years. It needed to be a success, and thankfully, it was. The Metro became one of the best-selling cars in Britain throughout the early 1980s, regularly appearing in the top 3 sales charts. Perhaps the Metro's most famous owner was Lady Diana Spencer, who drove a red Metro before her engagement to Prince Charles. The publicity from this royal connection was invaluable, and when her actual car was auctioned after her death, it fetched many times its original value. The Metro was remarkably space-efficient for its size, with clever packaging that maximised interior room. It came at exactly the right time when buyers wanted smaller, more economical cars following the fuel crises of the 1970s. The sporty MG Metro and later Metro Turbo versions added performance to the mix, creating genuine hot hatches that could embarrass much larger cars. If you're enjoying this nostalgic journey down memory lane, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Coming up, we'll explore the company car that became a British cultural phenomenon. The Cavalier. Mark II, launched in 1981, became synonymous with 1980s British company car culture. Based on the Opel Ascona, it was part of General Motors' strategy of creating world cars that could be sold across different markets with minimal changes. In Britain, the Cavalier became the default choice for company fleets. The trim hierarchy L, GL, GLI, CD, CDI, and the sporty SRI created an entire social structure. Your position in the company car park said everything about your place on the corporate ladder. The phrase Cavalier driver entered the language, often used to describe a certain type of aggressive, suited businessman racing down the motorway. The Cavalier was actually a very competent car. It was spacious, reasonably economical, and generally reliable. When Ford unveiled the Sierra in 1982, the British public's reaction was mixed, to put it mildly. The aerodynamic design was so different from the boxy Cortina, it replaced that it earned the nickname jelly mold, a term that stuck throughout its production run. Ford's gamble on aerodynamic styling was bold for the time, especially in the conservative British market. The Sierra represented a massive shift in car design philosophy. Where the Cortina had been all straight lines and sharp edges, the Sierra was curves and flowing lines. The drag coefficient was significantly better than its predecessor, which meant better fuel economy, a crucial selling point during the early 1980s when fuel prices were a major concern. Initially, sales were slower than Ford hoped, with many buyers put off by the radical styling. But the Sierra gradually won hearts and minds, especially when the performance versions arrived. The XR4i with its distinctive double-rear spoiler became an icon, while the later Cosworth variants would dominate touring car racing and become legendary among enthusiasts. Before we reveal which French hot hatch changed the game forever, remember to subscribe if you're loving this trip down memory lane. Coming up, the car that redefined what a small performance car could be. When the Peugeot 205 GTI arrived in 1984, it redefined what a hot hatch could be. While the Golf GTI was refined and sophisticated, the 205 GTI was raw, visceral, and incredibly engaging to drive. Motoring journalists ran out of superlatives, with many calling it one of the best-handling front-wheel drive cars ever made. The 205 GTI came in two flavors: the 1.6 with 105 bhp, and the later 1.9 with 130 bhp. Both were brilliant, though many enthusiasts actually prefer the Revia 1.6. What made the 205 GTI special was its combination of lightweight, perfect balance and that indefinable French flair. The minimalist interior focused on driving rather than luxury, and the distinctive Speedline alloy wheels became iconic. The 205 GTI developed a reputation for lift-off oversteer that could catch the unwary, leading to extremely high insurance premiums for younger drivers. But for those who could afford to run one, it offered a driving experience that few cars could match. Even today, good examples command strong prices from collectors who remember just how special these cars were. The Rover SD1, launched in 1976 but reaching its peak in the early 1980s, was one of the most striking executive cars ever produced in Britain. Styled by David Bash, its fastback design was clearly influenced by Italian exotic cars, giving it a presence that no other British saloon could match. The V8-powered versions, particularly the Vitesse, offered genuine performance in a practical four-door package. The police loved them, with many forces using SD1s for motorway patrol duties. The sight of a white SD1 with orange stripes in your rearview mirror became one of the defining images of 1980s British motoring. Unfortunately, the SD1 suffered from British Leyland's well-documented quality issues. Early cars in particular had numerous problems, from electrical gremlins to build quality that varied dramatically. But when they worked properly, they were magnificent, combining space, pace, and grace in a uniquely British package. The SD1 represented the last of the traditional British executive saloons before German brands came to dominate the sector. The Morris Ital, produced from 1980 to 1984, was essentially a facelifted Morris Marina, a car that was already outdated when it was launched in 1971. Italian design house Giugiaro provided the new front and rear styling, hence the Ital name, but underneath it was still very much the Marina. While enthusiasts might mock it today, the Ital served a purpose. It was cheap, simple, and easy to maintain. Parts were readily available, any mechanic could work on it, and it offered basic transportation at a low price. For many families on tight budgets, the Ital provided reliable, if uninspiring, motoring. The Ital represents a particular era in British motoring, the last gasp of the old-school rear-wheel drive family saloon before front-wheel drive took over completely. It might not have been sophisticated, but it was honest, and for many people, that was enough. The Talbot Sunbeam had a complicated birth, starting life as a Chrysler before the company's European operations were sold to Peugeot. Despite this confusion, the Sunbeam was actually a competent small car, particularly in its hotter versions. The Sunbeam Lotus, developed with Lotus cars, used a version of the Lotus twin-cam engine and was a genuine performance car. It achieved considerable success in rallying, with Henry Twyvonen winning the 1980 World Rally Championship Drivers' title in one. This success helped boost the image of the entire Sunbeam range. By the time the Sunbeam was discontinued in 1981, the Talbot brand itself was on borrowed time. Peugeot would soon phase it out entirely, making the Sunbeam one of the last cars to wear the Talbot badge. Today, they're rare sights on British roads, but those who remember them recall a surprisingly capable and underrated car. The Citroen NBX arrived in Britain in 1983 and was unlike anything else on the market. With its angular styling, plastic body panels, and most importantly, Citroen's legendary hydro-pneumatic suspension, it was a car that polarized opinion. You either got Citroen's unique approach to car design, or you didn't. The BX's party piece was that suspension system. It could raise and lower itself self-level regardless of load and provided a magic carpet ride that no conventional suspension could match. The dashboard looked like something from science fiction, with rows of warning lights and switches that controlled functions most cars didn't even have. While never a mainstream choice in Britain, the BX developed a devoted following among those who appreciated its comfort, economy, the diesel versions were particularly frugal, and sheer difference. It represented everything that was wonderful and weird about French car design, offering genuine innovation in an increasingly conservative market. By the 1980s, the Capri was already a classic. Ford's car you always promised yourself had been around since 1969, but the final incarnation, particularly the 2.8 injection model launched in 1981, became an icon of the decade. With its long bonnet, fastback styling and burbling V6 engine, it was as close as most Britons would get to an American muscle car. The Capri 2.8i became the star of television shows like The Professionals, cementing its image as the choice of tough guys and wide boys alike. The distinctive four-spoke pepperpot alloy wheels and subtle body kit gave it real presence, while the Cologne 5.6 engine provided genuine performance. When production ended in 1986, it marked the end of an era. The Capri had no direct replacement. The market had moved on to hot hatches and sports saloons. But for those who owned one, the Capri represented freedom, style, and a touch of rebellion. Today, good examples are highly sought after by collectors who remember the impact these cars had. Launched in 1983, the Vauxhall Nova, known as the Opel Corsa elsewhere, became the definitive first car for a generation of British drivers. It was small, relatively cheap to buy and insure, and came in a variety of versions from the basic 1.0 to the sporty GTE and GSI models. The Nova became the foundation of British modified car culture. Young owners would save up for alloy wheels, spoilers and sound systems, creating personalised cars that reflected their personalities. Magazines like Max Power and Fast Car were filled with modified Novas, each trying to outdo the others with wild styling and massive stereos. The performance versions were genuinely quick. The GTE, and particularly the GSI, could embarrass much more expensive machinery, offering hot hatch thrills at a lower price point. While many Novas suffered at the hands of enthusiastic modifiers, they played a crucial role in making performance accessible to younger drivers. The Austin Montego, launched in 1984, was Austin Rover's attempt at taking on the Ford Sierra and Vauxhall Cavalier. On paper, it had everything needed to succeed: modern styling, spacious interior, good equipment levels, and even a talking dashboard that warned you about various functions. The Montego was actually quite advanced for its time. That talking dashboard used digital voice synthesis, the suspension was well sorted, and the estate version offered van-like carrying capacity. The MG Montego Turbo was genuinely quick, offering performance that matched or exceeded its rivals. However, the Montego arrived just as British buyers were losing faith in British Leyland products. Despite being a competent car, it couldn't overcome image problems and buyer perceptions about quality. It remained in production until 1995, outliving the Austin brand itself, but never achieved the success it arguably deserved. When Fiat launched the Uno in 1983, it won European Car of the Year and surprised many with its modernity and quality. For a company whose previous products had a reputation for rust and reliability issues in the British climate, the Uno marked a significant step forward. The Uno was spacious for its size, economical, and surprisingly good to drive. The star of the range was the Uno Turbo, which packed over 100 bhp into a small, lightweight package. With its distinctive bonnet vents and side skirts, it became a giant killer, offering supercar baiting performance, in a straight line at least, for super mini money. The Uno proved that Fiat could build a world-class small car. It sold well in Britain, helping to rehabilitate Fiat's image and paving the way for future success. The hot versions developed a cult following, with their combination of Italian style and surprising performance making them stand out in the increasingly crowded hot hatch market. We end with the Renault 5 GT Turbo, launched in 1985. If the Peugeot 205 GTI was the sophisticated choice, the R5 GT Turbo was its wild cousin. With its distinctive blue paint, white wheels and boxy styling, it looked like it meant business. And it did. The GT Turbo's appeal was its raw performance. The turbocharged engine delivered its power in a rush that pinned you to your seat, while the handling was entertaining if occasionally wayward. It felt special in a way that many more expensive cars didn't, offering supercar thrills at hot hatch prices. Like many performance cars of the era, the GT Turbo suffered from high insurance costs that eventually limited its appeal. Many examples were stolen or crashed, making good survivors increasingly rare and valuable today. But for those who experienced one in period, the GT Turbo represented everything that was exciting about 1980s performance cars. These 15 cars represent more than just transport from a bygone era. They're reminders of a time when cars had distinct personalities, when brand loyalty meant something, and when your choice of car said as much about you as anything else you owned. Yes, modern cars are superior in every measurable way. They're faster, safer, more economical, and infinitely more reliable. But would you form the same emotional connection with a modern crossover that you did with your first XR3i? Would you still be talking about your current car in 30 years' time? The 1980s taught us that cars could be more than appliances. They could be expressions of personality, sources of pride and occasional frustration, and creators of memories that last a lifetime. These 15 cars didn't just move us from place to place, they moved us emotionally, and that's why we still miss them today. If this journey through the 1980s British motoring has sparked your own memories, hit that subscribe button and share your own motor stories in the comments below. What was your first car? Which 1980s legend do you miss most? Subscribe now for more automotive archaeology, and remember, they genuinely don't make them like they used to, for better and worse.